Now, speaking of authentic leaders, I'd like to introduce a man who understands the urgency of the moment and is acting accordingly. Senator Martin Heinrich from New Mexico is a member of the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee and the founder and co-chair of the Bicameral Electrification Caucus. Senator Heinrich understands the financial, environmental, and social opportunity associated with electrification and decarbonization. He and his colleagues in the Electrification Caucus are crafting and enacting policies that support electrification while simultaneously working to ensure that sufficient public and private funding is flowing to research and development of electrification technologies. And even though he recognizes that there are potholes in the road ahead, he is hopeful about the future. Why? Well, let's hear from him. Senator, please take it away.
Hi, I'm Senator Martin Heinrich, and I'm excited to welcome everyone to Green Builder Media's 2023 Sustainability Symposium. Last Congress, I teamed up with Senator Tina Smith of Minnesota and Representatives Paul Tonko and Kathy Castor to stand up the Electrification Caucus. We're now more than 50 members strong in both the House and Senate, and we are focused on accelerating the widespread electrification of our homes, our commercial buildings, and our transportation that is central to our overall work on climate action and economic competitiveness. Our members played instrumental roles in negotiating the passage of key electrification provisions in both the Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act. If your member of Congress is not part of our caucus, I would like to make a plug for you to please encourage them to join us. You know, my dad worked as an IBEW lineman, so I've been thinking about electrification really for almost my entire life. Our whole family took pride in knowing that when storms hit and the power went out, my dad would be the one who went out to climb the poles and turn the community's lights back on. The power grid that my dad spent his career maintaining was one of the greatest engineering feats in American history. It connected millions of Americans' homes to electricity throughout the 20th century. But it's really the transformation and decarbonization of that same power sector and transmission that will be key to our success in the 21st century. It wasn't until I went to college that I started learning about how we can use clean electrons, better materials, more efficient technologies to power our entire economy. While studying engineering at the University of Missouri, I helped build a carbon fiber solar power car called the Sun Tiger. We competed with several dozen other college solar car teams as we all raced from Dallas to Minneapolis. In the process, I realized how much energy we actually waste and how many things we can do better, cleaner, and smarter. We are now in a place where electric technologies from electric vehicles and heat pumps to induction stovetops and home batteries have leapfrogged their fossil-burning competitors in efficiency and performance. Pairing the electrification of our buildings, transportation, and industrial processes with the massive build-out of decarbonized power generation, highly efficient architecture, and quality construction techniques is how we will reduce pollution and prevent the worst impacts of a warming planet. I want to recognize all of the architects and builders who are leading in this work. The benefits for our climate are only one reason why widespread electrification is so important. Eliminating pollution from combustion appliances that are putting dangerous compounds into the air and in our homes and buildings will mean far fewer children with asthma and seniors with breathing problems. In many cases, electric technologies are also less expensive to operate. That means that once they've gone electric, families can reduce their monthly energy bills. The main reason that many families have not gone with higher performing electric options up to this point has been the upfront costs of newer technologies. That will, of course, change as more of us choose to electrify. By doing so, we'll encourage American manufacturers to produce more of these appliances and vehicles and in turn drive down costs for the consumer. But until we can get further along the cost adoption curve, we still need to levelize those upfront costs so that all of our families can see the benefits of electrification. That's why I work to include billions of dollars of new investments in the Inflation Reduction Act. We created new point-of-sale consumer rebates for electric household appliances. The high-efficiency home rebates will allow low to moderate income households to receive up to $14,000 in savings when they upgrade the appliances in their homes. It was important to put these savings at the point of sale. When a family's gas stove or water heater breaks, this rebate will provide an immediate incentive to switch over to electric. We will see state and local energy offices roll out these programs over the coming months. Effective implementation of these programs in all of our states and communities will be critical. We need these programs to be easy to navigate for all consumers. And I would encourage everyone here to engage with your state and local governments to make sure that they're focused on getting this right. I'm optimistic that we can achieve similar success to what Canada has delivered through their innovative Greener Homes initiative. That nationwide program started just 2 years ago, and it has delivered up to $5,000 grants and up to $40,000 in interest-free loans to many Canadian homeowners to install solar panels, heat pumps, improve insulation, and replace old windows and doors. To see where we're heading in the United States, you can look at a community I just visited last year in El Prado, New Mexico. The homes have innovative super insulating building envelopes that significantly reduce heat loss and utilize fully electric appliances. This concept reduces energy consumption by the homes as much as 90%, and with a constant indoor air temperature of around 70 degrees Fahrenheit. The homes all use materials and concepts that are designed to be scalable for other home builders and affordable to most homeowners. I've also visited with the woman-owned B Public Prefab, a local manufacturing company in northern New Mexico. And this business is designing panelized construction components for high performance and affordable homes that are all electric and equipped with highly efficient heating and water systems. This is the direction that housing is going, and it goes well beyond traditional single-family homes. We also need to focus on the manufactured housing that offer many low-income Americans their only path to homeownership. I spent years of my own childhood living in a double-wide trailer, so I know what it is like to live in this type of manufactured housing. And I know that people who live in these homes have a really hard time affording the energy burden that comes with low standards and drafty construction. In my home state of New Mexico, we have nearly twice the national average of manufactured homes. On average, the energy cost per square foot of a manufactured home is 70% higher than a site-built home. We urgently need to establish and achieve better energy conservation standards for these homes. Because it is low-income households with the largest energy burdens who stand to benefit the most from electrification and efficiency upgrades. In that spirit, we also need to realize some of our greatest opportunities for electrification are in upgrades to larger multi-unit apartment buildings. Last year, I visited New Mexico's first net zero energy multi-family affordable housing project in Santa Fe. All of the homes in this community receive 100% of their energy from a utility-scale solar array, and they use 100% electric appliances and HVAC equipment. This is what the future of electrification looks like. It's also a way to help address the affordable housing shortage. But it's not just our homes. The Inflation Reduction Act is also investing billions of dollars to supercharge our domestic manufacturing base for clean and electric technologies. That includes everything from batteries and electric vehicles to solar panels and heat pumps. New tax credits and incentives in the Inflation Reduction Act will also help heavy industry, commercial business owners, agricultural producers, and tribal governments electrify their operations. The infrastructure law is delivering billions of dollars to states to build out a nationwide EV charging network. We are also ramping up our investments in weatherization and insulation to make our buildings more comfortable and lower energy costs. Schools are getting funds to purchase new, clean, and electric buses. We're also investing in the siting and construction of the modern power transmission infrastructure that will form the backbone of our cleaner and more resilient electric grid. The federal government also has a major role to play in leading by example on electrification. Federal agencies can send a strong demand signal to the market through their procurement powers. We are already seeing this in developments like the recent announcement that 75% of U.S. Postal Service's new delivery vehicles and 100% of its new vehicles after 2026 will be electric. The Inflation Reduction Act included $3 billion to upgrade federal buildings and achieve net zero emissions in federal operations by 2050. I hope the commercial building sector will see not just the climate sense, but the business sense in following suit. Finally, we can't stop investing in innovation and in new solutions. That's why we're steering billions of dollars towards American innovation through the landmark CHIPS and Science Act. I'm hopeful that these investments in research and development will lead to the next generation of power electronics and power controls and other grid-enhancing technologies. We will also develop more advanced materials and solutions for renewable generation, advanced nuclear technology, cleaner industrial processes like thermal batteries, and larger scale and long duration energy storage. These advances will be key to solving the most difficult challenges currently standing in the way of fully decarbonizing our energy future. Before I finish, I want to leave you with a point that I've been emphasizing about this pivotal moment that we're in. It is not only natural for us to focus on the friction points that will inevitably come with a transition of this magnitude, but I want all of us to consciously see this as a unique opportunity for so many people to pursue meaningful, good-paying careers, a lot like the one my dad had as an IBEW lineman. Whenever I speak with young people, they tell me how important it is for them to protect their future on this planet. These same young people can be the heroes in this story. They can train for the trades careers that will power our entire decarbonized future. They will construct thousands of miles of new transmission lines. They'll manufacture and maintain the heat pumps and the electric vehicles that will help us all go electric. They'll build the onshore and offshore wind farms. They will work on advanced geothermal plants and modular nuclear reactors, and they will install the solar and storage projects on our homes and commercial buildings. I have seen some of these electrification heroes come through my own front door over the last few years as I work to electrify my house. These plumbers, electricians, carpenters, wind technicians, solar installers are living this transition each and every day, and they have so much opportunity on the way. But only if we can set them and set ourselves up for success. I encourage all of you to work with me and with the entire Electrification Caucus as your partners in achieving these goals. And I hope you have a productive and an inspiring symposium. Thank you.
Hello, Senator. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Thank you for your astute opening comments. And thank you for your work to electrify transportation and the built environment through the Electrification Caucus and other initiatives. Given that buildings in the US consume about 70% of the nation's total electricity and generate about 40% of the nation's total emissions, it's more important than ever that we electrify the built environment. According to the EPA, approximately 70 million American homes burn natural gas, oil, or propane, generating about 560 million tons of carbon dioxide each year. Fortunately, the electrification of America is happening, with jurisdictions from California to New York implementing mandates and rebates for all electric new construction and retrofit projects. But as we electrify transportation in the built environment, there are some well-founded concerns about the condition of grid infrastructure. Major investments are needed to update transformers, conductors, service panels, and other equipment to handle the increased electric demand. Few utilities are currently prepared to incur these costs, and it's really unclear whether they will allocate funding for these equipment upgrades or if they'll try to pass the cost along to home and building owners. So, Senator, a question for you. How can we upgrade and update the grid to accommodate full-scale electrification?
Well, I think the grid is going to have to change, and that's true at the transmission level where we need to make it possible, I think, as a nation for us to build big things again. So I think that conversation is very active in Congress right now. And I think it needs probably more focus from any administration. There needs to be one person who looks at these nationally significant projects and makes sure that they stay on track and that different agencies are actually working together at the table constructively. But there's a lot of change that needs to happen, you know, at the consumer level and everywhere in between. And I think it's just reasonable that we expect that our grid is going to change very rapidly in the next couple of decades to be able to really solve the challenges that we have and also just make homes better, healthier, more comfortable.
Thank you. We know that consumer interest in all-electric homes is mushrooming. According to a recent survey of homeowners across the U.S. conducted by Cognition Smart Data, Green Builder Media's Market Intelligence Division, nearly 55% of respondents indicated that they're interested in purchasing an all-electric home, with 100% of our Gen Z audience responding that they wanted to purchase an all-electric home. So clearly, the market pull for electrification is growing rapidly, and demand is being matched by innovation. Over 60% of respondents in that survey said that they would invest in heat pump heating and cooling systems. Nearly 60% say they would invest in solar systems, and 45% said that they would invest in heat pump water heaters and smart thermostats. Now, these types of electrification technologies are rapidly becoming the most cost-effective and reliable option in many markets and climate zones across the country. And we're seeing that venture capital and private investment funds are playing a key role in scaling innovative electrification solutions, helping to spur development, accelerate adoption, increase output, and decrease production costs. And the market growth for electrification technologies is expected to skyrocket from about $2.4 billion in 2020 to close to $13 billion in 2029. So, Senator, beyond some of these market available electrification technologies like heat pumps, induction cooktops, solar, and electric vehicles, what are some of the innovations that you're watching that will speed up the electrification of the built environment?
Well, I think it's fun right now to watch just how much change and how much research and development is happening. Capital is flowing into a lot of these things at a rate that we haven't seen in the past. But I'm really excited about some of the new storage technologies and new chemistries coming out. You know, some of the stories around iron air batteries, for example, those are not going to be the things that solve transportation electrification, but they're going to be huge on the grid. So the pace of innovation right now really is incredible. And just some of the innovations around things like power flow controls and just how we use data, dynamic line ratings, are going to change the amount of energy that we can put over the existing grid while we work on changing the grid and upgrading the grid that you and I were just talking about.
We experienced some strange and what seems like emotional rather than logical backlash against sustainability for a long time, decades. And right now, ESG is particularly in the hot seat. Is there any hope of bipartisan backing for electrification to support our national climate action goals? And what are the linchpins to generating bipartisan support?
I think you're seeing an evolution over time. It was very interesting to me because one of my early votes as a new freshman member of Congress was for the cap and trade bill. And I saw how radically polarized and politicized that was, and how it was very effectively used against some of my classmates who were not successful in their reelection efforts. And then you fast forward to now and you look at the Inflation Reduction Act last year, it just wasn't an issue in the election right after we passed it. And that tells you that things are changing. I think the long-term solution really is, if you look at some of the benefits of the Inflation Reduction Act, they're flowing disproportionately to red states. You're seeing a lot of the manufacturing of electric tech, batteries, generation, all of those things setting up shop in states where, I've never met an elected official who didn't like jobs in whatever district or state that they're from. And I think that will really change the politics of this over time.
I agree. Now, tell us about the Electrification Caucus. What are you most excited about, and what are your biggest obstacles?
I think, one, I'm excited about the fact that so many people on Capitol Hill want to be a part of this now. This really it wasn't a thing a few years ago, and we were able to stand it up quickly, change the conversation around climate and around a person's ability or a family's ability to make climate decisions themselves, not be completely dependent on the big utilities or power generators to be the only voice in the climate space. It really gives power to the individual or to the family to create their own route to a friendlier climate future. And we changed the debate so fast. I think it's a little funny, the backlash that you hear about with respect to things like gas stoves. Ironically, I think that has elevated the awareness of induction cooking dramatically in a really short period of time. And then you see influencers and chefs now adopting induction stovetops. So I think it's that debate that is what I'm most excited about, because it's just a debate that wasn't happening in the climate space just in 2019, and it's changed radically.
That's interesting. Thank you. How is the caucus interacting with and staving off pressure from the fossil fuel industry?
Well, I think, one, we provide a really healthy counterbalance to some of the misinformation that you see on the internet and in other locations. Unfortunately, right now, I think the parties are sort of solving for different things. And most of what the Electrification Caucus is doing is fairly technical in nature. It's like, how do we, as America, build a better mousetrap? And how do we build it here in the United States? And I think the IRA gave us some really powerful tools to be able to do that. And because many of those tools are being deployed, once again, in red states, it means that the pressure to unwind many of those things is balanced by those new jobs that are very real. When you see the battery manufacturing move in to states that have historically been Republican, those jobs are still going to matter deeply in those constituencies. And I think that is one of the ways we'll be able to keep this from being something that's effectively rolled back over time.
So can you share with us your end goal for the Electrification Caucus and how you get there through a combination of policy, collaboration, research, innovation, and investment?
Well, I think it's really just a forum to be able to find those new solutions and then embrace them and think about what are the policy implications of these things and how do we accelerate our trajectory to a cleaner, healthier world and solve the climate crisis along the way. You know, it's getting to a point now with the weather that we're experiencing, with the regional challenges and the drought and the Colorado River, the Rio Grande, where I'm from, the fires. Like, people are not saying there's no climate change anymore. But more importantly, people need hope. And so you have to have an optimistic vision of where to go. And I think the Electrification Caucus, as we find those new solutions, the better mousetraps for how to power our world, that gives people hope.
I love that. Thank you. Can you share with us an electrification success story?
You know, I love looking around the country at electrification is now happening very explicitly in lots of different political subdivisions. But one of the interesting things that happened that I really think changed the entire globe last year was the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And we saw this rapid pivot to things like heat pumps in Europe as they tried to, really, completely remake their energy system as quickly as they possibly could. And so you see places where historically there have been very few heat pumps. Places like Poland, the uptake of heat pumps is just through the roof in the past year. And then you look in the United States, and for the first time, heat pump manufacturing or heat pump sales passed over or became bigger than natural gas furnace sales. That's a complete game changer. And we're still early in the adoption process here. And these aren't straight lines. They tend to be, these adoption curves tend to be non-linear and really take off faster and faster. And we're starting to see that. So those are, some things that I look to and see the success is only growing over time.
Are there any specific cities that are electrifying that can serve as a model for other municipalities?
Close to home, I've watched as Las Cruces in New Mexico has really stepped up and led on a whole series of electrification efforts. Everything from walking the talk in their own decision-making and building construction decisions, but also working with developers on new housing. And there's a huge incentive where you can save an enormous amount of money if you only need one energy hookup. If you only need the electrification and you don't have to simultaneously do a gas connection. And if that saves you $5,000 or $6,000 or $7,000 on each home, and then that multiplies over the course of a new subdivision, it's amazing to see how perspectives change really quickly. And we're seeing some efforts to do all electric subdivisions in Las Cruces now.
We're tracking communities across the country that are electrifying, and it's interesting to see how the numbers are indeed penciling out. So last question for you, Senator. What can our attendees do to get involved in the Electrification Caucus and the general electrification movement?
I would urge folks to get to know their members of Congress, encourage them to be part of this caucus and to hold events and seminars and have two-way connections and conversations with all of your attendees and the people who want to see this stuff move at the local level. And then realize that a lot of the action, a lot of the places where it's easiest to really push these newer ways, better ways of doing things are going to be at the local level. You can have an enormous amount of positive change and impact, talking to school board members, talking to city councilors and county commissioners, going to planning and zoning meetings. Those are places where the electrification policy rubber hits the road. And those are all places where one person can make a huge difference.
Thank you so much, Senator. We appreciate your time with us today and your insight. And thank you so much for your important focus on electrifying our.
Best to all your participants. I appreciate the opportunity.
All right. Thank you, Sarah, for the wonderful Q&A you did with the Senator, and also for having him on here to talk a little bit about his efforts at the congressional level. I had a question that came in for you based on the opening remarks that you had earlier on. I didn't want to give all the questions to the senator. So David wanted to know about builder sentiment in regards to electrification. What are you hearing? Is it the same old opposition that we're used to seeing in regards to any change at all, or are you hearing that builders are actually starting to come around to some of these new methods?
Great question, Mike, and actually a very timely one, because Green Builder Media has a survey in the market right now, and I actually just checked the results so far. This morning, we have about 1,000 responses so far from builders and developers, and we asked questions about general sentiment about the marketplace, and particularly about IRA funding. And what I will tell you is that for the most part, the vast majority of our builder and developer audience is actually feeling pretty optimistic about the market in general. I think that about 85% feel like they're in good, stable condition with respect to finances and pipelines that'll get them through the rest of this year and into 2024 and 25. But I think the most interesting part of the survey that I saw that's relevant to this discussion is that over 80% of builder respondents feel like their businesses will be positively impacted by the IRA funding because of the pull-through that will bring for electrification technologies like heat pumps for heating and cooling and water heating, induction cooktops, solar plus storage. So there is definitely a high level of awareness with our audience. And keep in mind, we reach early adopters and first movers. And so our builder and developer audience is definitely the leading edge of the market that are building net zero or net zero ready homes that are shifting more and more towards electrification. I think that the struggles that they are encountering are partly, some of the things that I addressed in my opening comments and that the senator just addressed, which has to do with utility readiness and then labor issues. For all of the labor shortages that have been plaguing the building industry for many years, now in particular, there's definitely a deficit in skilled labor to install those electrification technologies. So I think that we're all hoping that funding from the Inflation Reduction Act and the infrastructure bill will come from the Department of Energy, also through the states to help train the workforce and to help solve for some of that deficit in the workforce training. But again, in general, when we look at builder sentiment and optimism, I would say that, again, our audience is much more optimistic today than they were, several months ago.
Gotcha. And one other quick question for you, Sarah, while we've got a moment. How do you see wages factoring into this too, right? So you've got adjustments with, inflation have increased prices, but do you see companies adjusting some of the wages as well?
Yeah, I think part of the attraction for the people who are entering the labor force in the areas of installation and integration of these electrification technologies is that these are higher paying jobs. And so I think that there is incentive for younger workers as our labor force in the building industry ages out. And I think that there will be, again, a pickup in, these jobs, because I think that we'll see increasing wage growth in those areas more so than in other areas of the construction labor market.
Yeah, and I think that'll help too. Because this is, look, the theme of this is the Great Conversion, and this is a very significant shift and change. And so it touches on many aspects of our society, and I'm encouraged by it, like many of your survey respondents, of which, by the way, I am not one. But just full disclosure, but I agree with a lot of those survey respondents. Something that is needed. And so I'm glad that you were able to share your insights with us today, Sarah. I really appreciate it very much.